One of the unfortunate realities or risks of investing in real estate syndications is a capital call where the sponsor, the real estate syndicator, they come back at you later and ask for more money. And then you, as a limited partner, an LP, a passive investor in that deal, you have to decide, am I going to actually cough up more money for this investment or not? So today we have brought in Alexei Chernobylsky to help us answer that question. He's the founder of Centrio Capital Partners, where he advises limited partners on passive, excuse me, real estate syndication investing. So I'm excited to hear your thoughts, Alexei, as someone who works with people all day, every day on this very topic. How should LPs decide whether or not to fund a capital call?
Yeah, thanks for having me on. I think what I would suggest is sort of like a six-step process. First, just to begin, there's two types of capital calls. Ones that I would call planned. In other words, you got into a deal and it was expected that you would get capital called throughout the life of the deal. What we're discussing here is not that, meaning the deal was fully funded at the outset, and the expectation was it would carry you to the end, and then all of a sudden you got a communication asking for more money, as you said. I just want to clarify. So the place where I would start first is, do you have the money? I know that sounds like so basic, but I've advised on many cases where someone is borrowing from someone might be borrowing from a 401k. I guess I don't want to get into like the intricacies and complications of that, but suffice it to say that that should only complicate the decision, right? In other words, if you have another interest payment to make in order to push out the cash as opposed to having it around and not need it, that should sort of sway you to not investing if you don't have the money. The second topic is broadly defined as, will the capital call solve the problem? So I've seen many calls where you had a rate cap that just expired, and you need to buy a new one, otherwise you won't be able to afford the debt service. And people fund the capital call, and all of a sudden 6 months later the GP comes back and says, the sponsor general partner comes back and says, hey, our debt is about to mature and we have to do a cash and refi. We need to do another capital call. And one of the beautiful things about real estate is it's actually pretty predictable. You knew at the outset when that debt expires. And so even though you would expect a sponsor to be transparent about sort of all capital call needs up front, or at least I would argue they should be, if it's coming up pretty soon, you as an LP need to make sure that there's nothing hiding that will need capital again soon again. So hopefully that makes sense. Third one, step 3 would be, what happens if you don't do it? Right? Meaning there's different answers to this question, ranging from nothing, i.e., and to be clear, I don't mean typically when you get one of these calls, the alternative is if we don't raise enough money, we're going to go through foreclosure and you're going to lose everything, right? That's usually what this email say. That's not what I'm asking, although that's important. But what I'm asking is, practically speaking, what happens to your invested equity as a result of not making the capital call? So there are a variety of ways this could play out. Sometimes you'll get diluted only to the amount, or pro rata to the amount that someone else invested. I would say that's sort of like the most favorable case for the initial LP. And the most extreme case is some sort of like cram down, is one way of thinking about it, is like where you sort of get crammed down for not participating or penalized. Sometimes that's in the form of being subordinated, i.e. not as important in the waterfall relative to someone else, or perhaps your equity just gets diluted by some big factor. So just make sure you know what the answer is. Many times I've seen emails that don't make it clear, and I think you should make sure that you understand. Number 4 is, what is the status of your position today? In other words, obviously no one has a crystal ball. You haven't sold the property, so you don't know. But like, if you were forced to make an estimate within, like a 25% range of being right, right? Like it can be a range, right? Depending on the cap rates that you're selling at or whatever. What is that range? Like, are we talking about your equity might be worth 1.5x of your original equity to 1.25, like that range, right? I.e., you're still in the money. Are we talking about like maybe it's somewhere between 1.25 and perhaps 0.75, i.e., perhaps maybe you've lost some money on paper, even though you haven't sold the property, or you're so far in the red that like it's almost abundantly clear that you're either 0 times on your money, i.e., you've lost the entire equity. Maybe if you're lucky, you'll get 25% of it back, right? So all those three scenarios are very different because, in some sense, um, you need to understand if there's anything to save, right? That's one way to think about it. And I would say that it's um, some people would refer to your original investment as a sunk cost. I've written like a whole article on this. I I think that is true to some degree. Um, Here it's pretty complicated though, because your sunk cost is also related to what happens to it. Right? In other words, if you get diluted, or something happens that triggers not investing in the capital call, and that sort of ties the two decisions together in a way that sunk cost wouldn't typically work. So yeah, so I would really recommend people to understand what their position stands. And then number five is, does it actually make sense? Like, imagine right now that you weren't invested. That's kind of like the sunk cost idea, and pretend you're looking at this investment. It's presented to you at the first time. You've never invested in this property. What information would you need to know to see whether you'll make any money back on this marginal cash that you're about to invest, right? Does it make sense financially? Is there a model? Is it believable? Have you sensitized it? How aggressive are the assumptions, and so on and so forth? And then number six is make sure you communicate. Communicate, take down some lessons, make sure you like sort of, if you decided not to invest or to invest, take down some talking points for yourself to remind yourself of the kind of things you learned from the process, and from the fact that you got surprised.
Yeah, no, that makes sense. Fortunately, we have not seen many capital calls in our co-investing club. I think we've seen 2 total out of, I don't know, 26 deals or something that we've done. It's still too many as far as I'm concerned. But yeah, I mean, in each case, it's been a difficult decision for me, for our other members who participated in that deal, whether to fund the capital call or not. So these are all great questions to help you kind of work through that decision, give it a framework. So just to recap, question 1, do you have the money? Question 2, will the capital call solve the underlying problem? What happens to your invested equity if you don't fund the capital call? What's the status of your position today? Is there anything to save? Does the capital call make sense? Do the numbers make sense? And finally, what can you learn from this experience? What can you take away from it so that you invest better next time and screen these
Exactly.
investments better next time? Alexei, in 30 seconds or less, how do you help people, and how can people connect with you if they want to take you up on that help?
Yeah, sure. So my name is pretty unique, so you can find me on Google pretty easily. I write pretty often on LinkedIn and Twitter for any of the folks that are on those platforms, and I also write to 4,700 LPs at lplessons.co, lplessons.co.
Well, I don't have that advantage of having a super unique name. So I have to put the G in front of my name so that anyone can actually find me on the web. But anyway, Alexei, thank you so much for coming in today. This was a great conversation, a great framework for anyone who is invested in passive real estate syndications. And guys, if you enjoy these quick, focused conversations that we have, please rate, review the show. Makes a world of difference to us. And on that note, we will catch you next time. Want the cash flow, appreciation, and tax benefits of real estate without becoming a landlord? You've heard of REITs and real estate crowdfunding, but you probably don't know much about 5 other ways to invest passively in real estate. So we put together a free video course for you to show you how to consistently earn 15% plus returns from 5 lesser known hands-off ways to invest in real estate. And even more importantly, we'll keep risk front and center in that whole discussion. Because really, what's the point of investing for high returns if you also take on high risk, right? So visit sparkrental.com/free to take our free course. Each video is snackable at 10 to 15 minutes long, and the entire course takes less time than watching a movie. Looking forward to chatting with you from within the course.